Hello, my name is Alpha, and in this video I'll be talking about one of my favorite games, Dark Souls. This video will be a part of a trilogy of videos where I analyze and talk about 3 Dark Souls games, what I like about them, what I don't like about them, and why I feel that my fire is fading. This is the first video in the series and it's a good starting point, but it isn't required to watch them in a certain order. And the video will of course contain heavy spoilers, so here's your fair warning, your chance to turn the video off. The final piece of content for the Dark Souls games left me in a bittersweet state of mind. On one hand, I was so happy to have been part of the amazing community of Dark Souls, and that I didn't miss the game. On the other hand, there won't be any more Dark Souls content. I was originally going to make one big video first, where I would talk about each game separately, but as I started writing the scripts I quickly realized that these videos would be long, and I think it's better to split them up into 3 separate videos. So this video will be about Dark Souls, the next one will be about Dark Souls 2, and the last and final video will be about Dark Souls 3. Another thing to note is that I played through all games blind, without a guide or without watching videos the first time I played them. So without further ado, let's get right into the video. I first played Dark Souls back in 2011, when it was released. I happened upon it at GameStop, a lonely game that somebody had returned, perhaps after they went hollow. After buying it, I went home and fired it up. After making 4 characters and playing for 2 hours, I quit. And no, I didn't quit because I found it too hard, I just thought it was so boring. But you have to understand that I was a fucking idiot back then. After this incident, the game just gathered dust for half a year. Luckily, I picked it up again. I don't really know why, perhaps it was fate that drew me in, but something made me start it again. This time I liked it much more and I fell in love quickly. Even though I found it hard then, I still liked it and I probed through it at a fast pace. Almost everyone that have played a Dark Souls game have come to the point where it all just clicks and you stop dying. I'm not one to brag, but that happened very quickly for me, as I've played hard games many times before. Ninja Gaiden, Castlevania, Punch-Out, etc, etc. And honestly, while Dark Souls is a hard game, it's more focused on trial and error and being patient and respecting every enemy. Even those that have played Dark Souls for thousands of hours die to basic mobs or traps every now and then. It just happens. And that's one of the best things about this game, in my opinion. That even though you mastered it, you can still die. If you're gonna live or die, everything is always up to you, and your summons if you prefer that. There's something about Dark Souls that I really can't explain, and that it makes me play through it every now and then. The mark of a truly brilliant game. There are so moments from the time I played through it for the first time that I can still recall. Blighttown? I played that shit in November. And I had pizza for dinner. Gwyn? I beat him with the great sword of Artorias and a simple shield. No parries. Well, I cried on the inside. And even though the controls and graphics are outdated, I still prefer this one over the Dark Souls 2 and 3. I think it all lies in the atmosphere, the world, and the amazing story. I know that Dark Souls 3 also have those, but it's more spread out and the atmosphere is less thick. The first playthrough is always the one that sticks with you the most. It resonates and becomes an unforgettable memory. It was a journey, an experience, and it's the most special one. No other playthrough comes close. It all starts out with a simple setting. Get out of jail and fulfill your destiny. You learn that you're the chosen one with one mission.
When thou ringest the bell of awakening, the fate of the undead thou shalt know.
Simple, but effective in terms of storytelling, while also pushing the player to go to certain areas. The only real cutscene that's narrated is the opening, if I remember it correctly. and it perfectly sets up Dark Souls' premise, while also introducing you to the background of the world. The music and the narration is spot on, and it draws you into the game without you noticing it. After that, you start off in the Undead Asylum. To be honest, I love this place. Playing through it again and again is strangely addicting. I think the main reason why I love it is the feeling and architecture of the place. A half broken down asylum filled to the brink with mindless hollows. Getting outside for the first time and walking up those snow and leaf covered stairs to your destiny. Just standing outside and looking back at the crumbling building is something special indeed. A hot tip from me to you is to not pick the Master Key as a starting gift in your first playthrough. It makes the game much easier in my opinion, and some areas should feel oppressive and tough, like the depths, which gets easier with the Master Key as you'll have access to the bonfire easier and earlier. I'll take up some points that I think is important for the gameplay in Dark Souls and why I think the game teaches the player many different things without uttering a word. The first major thing is the meeting with Oscar of Astora. Getting crushed by the boulder, seeing the hole in the wall and getting the ever so important Estus Flask. This basically says, hey, there might be hidden things here and there, be sure to search for them as they may contain awesome shit. The boulder also teaches you that the land of Lordran is full of hidden things, both areas like the painted world of Ariamis and hidden items like Old Witch's Ring. These are in no way necessary to complete the game, but they always contain information on the lore or other interesting things. It intrigues me that From decided to cut most of Oscar's questline and inclusion in the game, but maybe it's better this way. But there will always be this thought of what if. I want to take a minute also to talk about one of the best areas in the game, the Firelink Shrine. This is one of those special creations that speaks volumes without saying a single word. The layout, the music, the inhabitants, and the well thought out placement of everything. When I first got to the Firelink Shrine, I couldn't wait to get started. Like many others before me, and like many others after me, I was dumb enough to go into the graveyard first. And after dying 8 to 9 times, I realized that perhaps I wasn't supposed to go there. I'm a bit slow, so that's why. This is a great use of enemy placements early on in the game. By making the skeletons harder to beat, there's a good chance you'll die while fighting them. The game tells you, don't go here basically. So even if you didn't give a shit about the Crestfallen, you'll still find out where to go in due time. It gives you a lot of clues on what to do or where to go, if only you listen, that is. This teaches you another important aspect of these games. NPCs often have at least one interesting thing to say, so be sure to talk to everybody and listen closely. And if you happen to go down into New Londo, you'll probably meet your doom pretty fast. But you can tell by the design of New Londo that it's not a welcoming place. It's dark, the area is in a large cave out, and the atmosphere is bone chilling. This type of symbolism is used very often in video games, and it's a great tool for impacting the player's thoughts and feelings. The first stairs that led from the Firelink Shrine can indicate many things. Stairs is a common symbol of progression, and so are doors, which often opens up possibilities for the player. These are some of the things that's widely known and used in many different video games. But there are many other tools that developers use to teach the player things. The gameplay itself is quite good, although a bit stiff. Unlike Dark Souls 2 and 3, you can't roll in 8 directions and are forced to either roll forward, backward or sideways. The weight of the weapons feels real, and it almost feels like you're swinging the blade or spear yourself. The other thing I love is that enemies don't give a shit about you and will attack you at the same time if they get that opportunity. This forces the player to really think about their actions and plan a good strategy when approaching the enemies. The Hellkite Drake is also a great foreshadowing of the future meeting with the same creature. It comes down briefly to basically say, hey, here I am, I'm gonna fuck you up real soon. Another major event taking place early is the meeting with the well-known First Black Knight. You've probably fought him at least once during your first playthrough, and you probably died. If you so happen to emerge victorious, you'll be rewarded with a blue tearstone ring. Prevailing over hard obstacles can net great rewards. I also think that the Taurus demon is one of the most overlooked bosses in Dark Souls. Why, you ask? Well, get some popcorn and sit down, because I'm about to blow your mind. Well, not really, but anyway. This boss teaches you not one, but two things. The first encounter with this big monster will probably kill you in one of two ways. 1. Getting pushed off the wall. Or 2. Getting an arrow in the knee, followed by an axe to your neck. Which brings me to the 2 points the player can learn from this guy. 1. Be wary of your surroundings, even in boss fights. And 2. Sometimes there are more than one way to kill a boss. Case in point, if you died because of the archers, you'll probably want to kill them so the boss fight itself becomes easier, right? Well, that's a conveniently placed ladder. I wonder where it leads. You get what I'm saying? Now hang in there, I only have 2 points left to make. The first of the 2 is the light in the darkness, Solaire of Astora. In a world that's as depressing and somber as Lodran, Solaire still remains strong both in mind and body, determined to find his own son. He quickly becomes a guide and mentor to the player, helping him/her in tough situations and while never losing hope. Up until one point in the game, at the bonfire in Lost Isolate. The world of Dark Souls is a lonely, desolate place filled with stuff that wants to kill you, while no one wants to help you, almost. Seeing this ever-steadfast man, whose resolve is unparalleled, lose hope is heartbreaking. But even though he has seemingly lost all hope, he still goes on, determined to see this through to the end. His story ends in 2 different ways depending on your actions. He either, most likely, dies at the hands of you yourself, after being corrupted by a chaos bug.
My son, it's dark, so dark.
Or he survives and helps you take down Gwyn before feeding himself to the fire, and after this arduous journey, finding his own son himself. He's truly an iconic character and one that is hard to forget. I got a bit off track there, I'm sorry. But anyway, Solaire teaches us 2 things. Never give up, no matter how hard it may seem. And that even though Lodran is desolate and dangerous, there may still be help to be found. So don't be afraid to take those opportunities. Dare to take the leap. There are of course many other points, but I think I have covered the most important ones so far. Solaire introduces us to another very important aspect of Dark Souls, the intertwined worlds. Even though it sounds like a lot of gibberish, it starts to make sense after a while. This is basically unlocking co-op mode for those of you who doesn't know. He even says,
The flow of time itself is convoluted, with heroes centuries old phasing in and out.
The online part is actually alive even today, with newer players coming in and experiencing Dark Souls for the very first time. And the events that celebrates Dark Souls' birthday helps those newer players experience the game like it was when it first came out. All of this can easily be applied to real life as well. Even though we may get help sometimes, or even though we travel the same roads, every journey is different. And in the end, the only one who can finish your adventure is you. I mentioned before that there were, and are, 3 main points that makes me come back to replay Dark Souls every now and then. The first one is atmosphere, and I really think that is the biggest point in the game's favor. Every area has a certain feel to it. Take Tomb of the Giants for example. The first time I played through it, I was terrified. It still makes me feel on edge, and I'm always scared of running into those skeleton beasts. That will never change. And Blight Town makes me feel suicidal beyond belief. Exactly the same kind of way that Sen's Fortress makes me tense and focused. Jokes aside, I've grown to love each area in the game in different ways, and I appreciate the level design more and more as time goes on. And I think that why I start to like these areas more and more is because they stand out. They were a wall I had to climb before I could continue, and the hardship of these areas is not easy to forget, but it also makes them more dear to me. At first I fucking hated going through that swamp with all the toxic bullshit and traps. Nowadays I appreciate it way more, and I can honestly say I like it. It's a smartly designed area to make you feel lost and hopeless, beyond salvation. Another cool thing that I hadn't realized until recently is that the Gaping Dragon ascends from Blighttown to his boss area. You know where you find that dragon scale in Blighttown? That's where he was before he came to kick your ass. Two areas stand out to me that I try to avoid though, but ultimately can't. The first is the Great Hollow, and the second is the Duke's Archives. That shit is just... I hate that shit. Tomb of the Giants is also a magnificent level on its own. Not only is it very dark, so if you didn't get the lantern earlier, you're going to have to rely on the placed lights. But it's also oppressive. If you weren't a nyctophobic person before, get ready, because this area will test your bravery. If you happen to have the lantern, you still have to choose to either use it and one-hand a weapon or have a shield to block unknown attacks. And that option of choices is greatly appreciated, but it doesn't make the combination of darkness and skeleton dogs easier. It also shows off the level design to a certain degree. If you're an explorer, you can find the effigy shield, but you can also spot a bonfire on a ledge straight below you on your way back to the main route. So you know that a safe place is close. Later on, when you're nearing the lair of Nito, there are two things I love. The first is that the holy man, Paladin Leroy, is gonna invade you if you're human. But the question remains, why does he, a Paladin of Light, protect Nito, the very first of the dead? The other is that there are several skeletons bowing towards Nito's lair, as if paying respects or praying to him. A neat little detail, but also powerful. The magnificent Anor Londo is still one of the best reveals in any game to me. Just the sheer scale and feeling of excitement that awaited. Thinking that you could actually traverse a large part of the area was super cool. If only you could venture into the surroundings of Anor Londo 2, that would be amazing. And, while I'm on the topic, I just want to take a moment to appreciate the beautiful architecture and world design. I read that From took inspiration from real-world locations to make certain areas in Dark Souls, and it has paid off. Also, I've never noticed it before, but the skybox might be one of the most realistic skyboxes in a video game, and it actually moves. Anor Londo is one of my favorite areas in Dark Souls, and it's simply stunning. I think the graphics and sound design also plays a big part in making the game so atmospheric. The boss themes makes the fights so much harder, as you'll be more tense. The soothing but unsettling soundtrack while in Firelink, or the melancholic and sorrowful music when finding the fair lady, speaks so much about the lore and background of these locations. The world of Dark Souls isn't a happy one, it's filled with despair and pain, to the point of robbing the hope, will and life out of even the best warriors. There are almost no happy endings, and it speaks so much to me. Don't misunderstand though, I like happy endings, but this feels more real, more relatable. Lordran is certainly stacked with different surroundings, such as forests and castles, and they all connect together in a logical way. Not being able to fast travel until late into the game also lends to the connection of the game world. As you travel these grounds, you learn the placements of enemies and structures, and not having a map is exciting and risky. You really never know what might hide behind the corner, at least not the first time. And that's where the genius shortcuts come in. The most famous one that always blows people's mind is the shortcut back to the Firelink shrine, and rightfully so. You've traveled so far, fought so many and persevered against all odds, only to find yourself mere meters away from where you started. Another shortcut that I was quite surprised about was the one when you go up from Blighttown to Firelink Shrine. What makes them so great is that I think you'll never see these shortcuts coming, making the reveal that much better. When you finally get the Lord Vessel and the ability to fast travel, you realize just how far you've come. The timing of when you get the Lord Vessel is certainly clever, as you have most likely traveled to most of the places in the world, and now you can get the remaining items and finish up on things to do before the 5 major bosses. But I think what really makes the world come together and feel like it's a real alive world, apart from the connections, is the scale and realism in it. You can actually see some locations from other places. The Undead Burg and the Hellkite Drake Bridge can be seen from Darkroot Basin, which also connects brilliantly to the Undead Burg in the beginning of the game, by the way. The Demon Ruins and the Ash Lake can be seen from the Tomb of the Giants, and you can see both the Great Hollow and Blight Town from Firelink Shrine. I think my favorite areas in the game is the hidden area, the painted world of Ariamis, purely from a design and atmosphere perspective, and the obvious choice, Kiln of the First Flame. Kiln of the First Flame is so simple and yet so very effective. A large area with nothing but ash, and at the center lies an arena. This area is huge, but with almost nothing in it. It only hints at the remains of what have been there before. This area oozes atmosphere, and when you enter the huge fog door, you expect an epic final boss fight with Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight who you read and heard so much about. A true legend. And when you finally enter the fog door, you're met with a broken, mindless shell of a man. A piece of cinder. There are no heroes here, and the soundtrack does a great job at conveying that message. This isn't some heroic fight meant to go down in history. It's just a sad, unavoidable meeting between two warriors. After the deed is done, you'll most likely stop for a while to think over your actions, if you haven't done it earlier in the game. Are you really the good guy? I still haven't found the answer to this question myself. Now, I said that the story is amazing, but it's the characters who make it really interesting. They are a part of the story, and when they move around in the world of Lordran with their own missions and purposes, it makes them feel more alive, almost like real characters. And even those who stay in place have a personal story. They change their dialogue depending on what you've done or achieved, and they never feel boring. Who knew that so few characters could make this huge world feel so alive? Still, it's just surprising how From managed to make every character interesting in their own way, while also giving them their own storylines. Siegmeyer, Kiran, yes, that is actually how you say the name.
I am Kiran, and that is a keepsake.
Anyway, Andre, Ria, Logan, and all the other ones, they each have unique journeys through the same land as you, and if you'd like, you can follow their individual storylines and see where they end up. It makes this dark, desolate world easier to traverse, knowing you have companions fighting the same battles. After a while, the NPCs feel more like friends, most of them anyway. I always find great joy in catching up with them at different points in the game, but it's not always fun and happiness abound. Many of the NPCs have a cruel or somber fate, and your spirit will undoubtedly lessen when you find out what happened to the ever so joyful characters that you regarded as mentors, teachers, even friends. Hell, even a character like Kirk, who first appears as evil, have a redeeming background on his motivations. This is an important lesson. Life isn't always fair. Most of the time, you really have to fight for what is important to you, and most of the time, you can't make the best choice for everyone involved. I could go on and on, but I think my point is made. The story itself is told in an unusual way, a silent storytelling, mostly. Sure, you can speak to the NPCs and they'll sometimes say fascinating stuff, but reading item descriptions, finding weapons, items and armor in special placements, and then coming up with theories why it's there is strangely addictive and satisfactory. And that's another thing that I think makes Dark Souls so good. The story isn't completely set in stone, so the whole community have spawned many great ideas about many different aspects of the game, and it makes everything so much more interesting. Sure, the game may sometimes hint at certain events, but it almost never says how it has been or shall be out loud. Dark Souls also introduced something that wasn't in Demon's Souls, namely covenants. These cool pacts or factions can offer many different things, and you, the player, can choose which one to swear an oath to. It's very realistic that if you happen to leave this and join another one, you'll be punished in different ways. But if you follow the rules and contribute to them, you'll be rewarded with weapons, rings, armor and even spells. Covenants like Blades of the Dark Moon, Forest Hunters and the Gravelord servants also impacts the multiplayer experience, which in turn makes the online portion much more interesting. I think these covenants is like the icing on an already amazing cake. It just makes it better, with the risk of getting diabetes. Incidentally, the multiplayer never was that amazing in Dark Souls, neither on PC or consoles. On consoles you had to wait for an eternity to summon someone, and then it wasn't even guaranteed that you summoned them. There are 4 major bosses in the game, plus the final boss, Gwyn himself. The 4 Great Souls hunt is perfectly implemented into the game, and the transition from getting the Lord Vessel to when you start your hunt for the bosses is amazing. It's a smart decision to give the player the freedom to choose which order to take on the bosses. This makes you feel more free, like you're in charge of your own actions and you get to decide what to do next, not the game. Seath, Nito, the 4 kings, they are all great and unique bosses, but the Bed of Chaos makes me wanna... Aside from the opening cinematic, the player reads and learns about the Fantastic Four through the game, and this builds up the bosses in the player's head, so when you finally meet them, it feels like they're on a completely different level compared to you, an ordinary hollow. When they finally lay dead before you, you feel that much better, ready to take on the world and the rest of the bosses. And then Gwyn comes in and stabs you in the heart with the famous Field's Blade. It's glorious. But From wasn't done yet, they had more epicness to give. 10 months after the release of Dark Souls, the first and only expansion for Dark Souls was released, Artorias of the Abyss. Now in true Dark Souls spirit, to access the DLC, the player had to free Dusk in Darkroot Basin, get the broken pendant in Duke's Archives, and then go back to the same place in Darkroot Basin to get grabbed by an arm. And the DLC itself is nothing short of amazing. Never before have I entered a boss arena and instantly been apprehensive the same way you enter Artorias' domain. Throughout the game you hear the stories surrounding him, how everyone praises him and adores his bravery and skill. He's basically a legend. Now you stand in his path and the corrupted knight only sees an obstacle that needs to be removed. He's using his bad arm without his trusted shield and with only one arm, and yet he poses a greater challenge than even Ornstein and Smough themselves. There are also some interesting NPCs in the DLC, like Hawkeye Go and the Lord's Blade Kiran. Go is a blind, badass giant that made my jaw drop after he fired off the legendary shot that downed Calamite. Imagine this giant in his prime.
Yes. A truer shot was never loosed.
And Kiran is the bearer of one of the 4 night rings, the Hornet one, which hints at her profession as an assassin. But she won't drop it, and you can instead find it on a body, most likely her own dead corpse, behind Artorias' grave. It hints at a love story of some kind between the two before the events of the game happen. It gives the characters more depth, makes them more interesting, more memorable. You remember their story because it meant something to you. It impacted you in some way. The Royal Wood, Ulasil Township and the Abyss was cool to explore. It wasn't just a dark, empty nothing with items lying around. It indirectly told you a story about the fate of Ulasil. The Royal Wood is obviously Darkroot Woods in the past, and where you fight Sif is the very same place that hosted the Mushroom Elizabeth before. The township was ruined by the townspeople themselves. A serpent urged them to dig below Ulasil, and they did. They came across the grave of a primeval man, and through torture they broke him, and in turn his pendant. And he turned into Manus, father of the Abyss. The beginning of the Abyss tells a story just by a scene, by design. The jail with chains hanging, used on townspeople before you came here, painting a horrible picture. Then we have the hole in the wall that makes you instantly be like, oh shit. You know that you're getting closer and closer to the big bad boss. Other areas do this too. For example, the Titanite demon just below Andre is in a large room with broken stones and pillars, which clearly indicates that a battle has taken place, or that the place is old and is beginning to crumble. Either way, the area feels more alive because of this. You finally reach and beat Manus in an epic battle. And by doing all of this, you save the past dusk, and you let Artorias' legend be untainted by the truth. He didn't defeat Manus, and he didn't manage to beat the Abyss itself. Alvina even tells you this when you speak to her. But he gave it his all, and his grave would become a symbol of bravery and honor. Because of all this, the fight against Sif becomes so much harder. Not the difficulty itself, but because you realize that Sif only wants to protect you, so you won't suffer the same fate her dear friend Artorias did. And when she starts to limp, man, that shit is just heartbreaking. Now back to the main game. The fight against Ornstein and Smo is brilliant. To a lot of people, the difficulty spiked a lot when they fought Ornstein and Smo for the first time. And I agree. I myself was stuck there for a good 3 hours before being triumphant. But it's supposed to be stressful. Throwing two huge foes at you at once is a great lesson. A lesson in managing unfair odds. Nowadays the fight is much easier, but it's monumental to new players, and it's what I think Dark Souls partly represents, overcoming the odds and being victorious. And the ending, the fight against Manus, everything just speaks dedication and love from From. I think that's a major reason as to why Dark Souls is so relevant today. I said earlier that I'm drawn back to this amazing world every now and then, and I listed reasons why. But there's also another thing. I think this thing is because you want to experience it like you did the first time. The charm of the game is immense, and it's hard to recreate or trump this feeling. I honestly think that it's a shame that many developers straight out copies the game today. Taking inspiration is fine, and in many cases it can make the game that much better. But I think it's too much right now. Honestly, Dark Souls have given me so much joy and happiness throughout the years. Even when times have proven difficult for me personally, it has eased that suffering and made me feel better. It's really hard to explain exactly why, but that's how I feel. Okay, so one negative thing that I think Dark Souls have created is the get good mentality. To a certain degree, it's a good thing, and it holds weight today among the many easy games out there. But not being able to criticize a game because of its flaws is so annoying. And I can say that out loud. Dark Souls do have flaws. But God fucking help you if you say that out loud in any comment section, as you'll get lynched by Dark Souls fanboys or trolls. Whew, felt good getting that off my chest. I am sure that this series will be one that will be remembered many years ahead, and many games will, without a doubt, take inspiration from Dark Souls, or let themselves be inspired by it. I know for a fact that I will play it now and then, as it still holds that special place within my heart, and I know that I'll never forget it. Do I want a remaster of this game? I really don't know. In some ways I do want them to make the game whole, and in other ways I want it to remain the untouched perfection that it always was and will be for me. But I know that Dark Souls have given me great memories that I'll cherish forever. Dark Souls truly is a flawed masterpiece.